Nice to see everyone. Nice for me to be back in Düsseldorf. It's been a while. I'm here just to talk about a few topics relating to the new aesthetic. I'm going to introduce my understanding of the topic and talk a little bit about the book that we produced, but mostly try to pull out some kind of underlying issues, actually, the kind of political side of things, the implications for us as human beings. Starting with a quote from Kevin Slavin, who was kind of present but not present at the first public unveiling of the new aesthetic concept at South by Southwest. He says, "We're writing things that we can't read. We've produced systems of such complexity that they've all been written by humans, but they are totally illegible to any human on Earth, and yet their effects are quite tangible." As has already been stated, the new aesthetic was a design concept and research project created by London-based designer James Bridle in 2011. And it took the form of open research, mostly posted to his Tumblr site. The images contained on the site showed us a contemporary reality, showing us how machines see and how we're sculpting our reality to be better seen by machines. Since the Tumblr started, then there followed this presentation at South by Southwest, and then a lengthy public response to the concept by science fiction writer Bruce Sterling. All of these responses causing quite a storm online, you could say. And this new aesthetic idea, which it still seems to capture the imagination. We're still talking about it. Here we are, still discussing it. So despite the fact that it has been dissected so many times over already, we're still trying to get to grips with it. Because this, within the concept, there are so many different ways it can go and different areas that it intersects with. Open source culture, post-internet, as you indicated, meme culture. All of these things kind of come under this umbrella. So there's kind of an endless number of entry points that we can look at. And it presents us with an opportunity to rethink the connections between these contexts. But these are risky, dangerous times we're in. This is not, it's not so simple, of course, and you'll see some of the sinister side to some of the images that were shown on the Tumblr. It's a period when critique should thrive, and we need to forge new alliances and try to find new ways to really understand the ways that some of these images analyze reality for us. So let's see some of these images. The first two examples that I want to show you speak to how we adopt the language of digital territory. So in this case, we're looking at a piece of glitch camouflage. There seems to be a lot of camouflage, actually, in the in the new aesthetic image collections online, and for good reason. We're trying to find actually new ways of hiding. In fact, I would say that if you had to sum up my entire presentation in a few words, it's about cat and mouse games, hiding and seeking. We're creating systems for viewing and discovering, and we're also trying to come up with systems to hide from them. So this is one way you can try to avoid detection, or it's just a cool fashion statement. And then there's also this very important and interesting project by Adam Harvey called CV Dazzle. Has anyone seen this image before? No? Okay, so I'll explain what it is. There's different kinds of facial recognition technologies, and through the use of hair and makeup techniques, he's come up with a way to avoid detection by an automated system. So on the top, the squares bordered in red, that style of haircut and that style of makeup indicates to the computer that there's no face there, actually. That's not a human being. And the ones on the bottom with just a little bit of makeup or a different kind of haircut, the machine can still tell that that's a person. So he's created this kind of elaborate costuming, you could say, for trying to figure out how to break out of the tyranny of these emerging systems that will just kind of scan us by our faces and then remove all our public privacy. He named the project CV Dazzle. The name is derived from CV for computer vision, and Dazzle after the dazzle camouflage that was used in World War I, the kind of, well, you'll see some images of it coming up as well, the kind of stuff that enables you to kind of camouflage an object in plain sight with a very wild pattern. So the goal of this project is really to kind of just like how the dazzle camouflage on a ship or a plane breaks up the kind of image of what it means to be a plane or a ship. This breaks up what it means to be a face. If you have these kinds of things, it couldn't be a face.
Jeremy Bailey made an animation with this. No?
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. Okay, so that's CB Dazzle. Bruce Sterling had a major voice in kind of commenting on these images and the existence of this Tumblr and this concept, presenting all of these images of how machines are viewing us and we are sculpting our reality for them. And he says that the new aesthetic concerns itself with an eruption of the digital into the physical, which I think is a nice short definition of how to think about it. It's been going on for a generation and it should be much better acculturated than it is. I mean, yeah, we're talking about dazzle camouflage from World War I, you know, so it's not exactly... some of the stuff is, of course, also more new than others, so it's not really fair to kind of trash the new aesthetic for not being new enough, but rather it's more about this finally coming together as kind of a body of research in how James Bridle has assembled it. So here we go. This is an example of the dazzle camouflage that I have been talking about, and then this is kind of the iconic image, if you will, of from the new aesthetic Tumblr, an image of how an airplane is viewed and captured by the Google Map satellite cameras. So it's got this beautiful ghosting, RGB ghosting. Undoubtedly, it's not just that these are aesthetically pleasing or interesting images, but also that our very tools are our limitations. You know, the tools that we use become the real boundaries of our expression. I'm sure as a designer you can sympathize with that. Images are made in Photoshop and Illustrator. Video is edited in Final Cut Pro. I'm quoting someone here. Buildings are rendered in Autodesk. Books are written in Scrivener, and so on. To paraphrase McLuhan, the hardware, software is the message, because while you can imitate as many styles as you like in your digital arena of choice, ultimately they all end up interrelated by the architecture of the technology itself. So, I mean, and I'm sure if you think back into your own life, you can think of kind of examples. You know, the first time you ever tried to do something with Photoshop, and, you know, of course it's kind of, you used the brush tool and made a really brush tool looking thing. You know, that's the limitation of that tool. That's the, you know, I mean, once you become a professional designer and you get really good at it, you can then start to transcend the tools a bit or write your own tools. And that's something that as a kind of, that offers you a kind of emancipation out of that trap if you're able to write your own tools. But not all of us, of course can. Here we have this is an image of a relatively new building, a pretty new building in Orléans in France, which is about 1 hour outside of Paris. It's their new FRAC Center, Center for Contemporary Art. I mean, this is literally a digital distortion, and as you can see, all around the building, it's these very kind of what you would consider to be kind of more normal-looking French architecture, and then this literal eruption of the digital into the physical in the middle of Orléans. It's a really cool building. It's actually really interesting from the inside as well. A piece of glitch art by Dutch artist Rosa Menkman. So again, exploiting the kind of the particular characteristics of the digital media itself when it has errors, when it breaks down, and using that as an aesthetic of its own. And this pair of shoes, the now become kind of semi-famous low-resolution shoe by the Shoemakers United Nude. This is, I mean, they brought it out as a limited edition shoe, but then it became so incredibly popular. Everyone wanted them, so now you can get it in almost any color. But seeing this kind of effect of, you know, it's kind of nice to have this pixelated effect. It's made, it's cut from a piece of rubber in a very precise way, and so it's one piece. It's kind of an homage to the technology of how you cut this this material, as well as an interesting fashion statement. So, how do you tackle this topic? Looking at these images and thinking about them, and the processes behind them, the processes of cutting that rubber for the shoe, of collecting the images from above for Google, etc. Where do you even start? And actually, I'll tell you a secret, as a small diversion, not really a secret, but just over a year ago, I wanted to conduct an experiment as part of my role at V2. I wanted to explore the idea of generating new content, a new publication, by doing something kind of sadistic, by locking people up in a room, or in this case, this guy tried to escape by going outside, locking people up in a room for several days and saying, okay, we're gonna write a book together, we're gonna be here all day, all night, and at the end, we're gonna have an actual publication. So it's called book sprinting, and Adam Hyde, who coined the term, came to mediate the session for us. It was interesting, just on a process note, thinking about how how it's very possible these days now, of course, for these things to be online and distributed. Like we could have done it all over Google Docs, for example, possibly. But there's just nothing like, look how tired Michelle looks there. Sitting on a beanbag with a bunch of people, spreading the pieces of paper physically out on the floor to actually see how it's visually coming together and yeah, coming together as a whole. So it's kind of interesting that in this in this moment where all these possibilities are there, and we could video Skype, we could just keep video Skype going all day and work on Google Docs. This somehow is more compelling because it creates a kind of pressure cooker environment. So locked up into this group environment for about 4 or 5 days, a group split equally between writers and academics decided to undertake to write this book from start to finish. And I gathered the group under the name Fiddling While Rome Burns, because actually at the time it was the culture cuts in the Netherlands were really biting, and V2 had just released a book called Vital Beauty, and I thought, okay, like yeah, let's talk about beauty. Let's see how far off topic from the crisis we can really get. Really fiddle while Rome burns, and so that's the initial impetus for bringing the group together. And then, however, once we started talking about beauty and thinking about aesthetics in general, this new aesthetic topic was really breaking. So try as I might to kind of steer it away from the obvious way that it could have gone, it went there anyway, which is absolutely fine, because it gave us a very meaty topic to dive into. So this phenomenon, became the subject of our conversation in our life for the following few days and nights. And in the book, perhaps provocatively, we believe that a lot could be learned from the development of the new aesthetic. I mean, it was something that came up and spread like wildfire. I'm really glad that you talked about memes so much, because it's great. It's like it exactly exemplifies like how something can simply catch fire and take over. It temporarily mobilizes networks, and that's something that's a kind of interesting aspect of network culture. It leads us to ask, is it possible to sustain that kind of energy? Is it even desirable, for example, to mobilize a network around a topic and then it simply disperses, which is, perhaps, is it tragic? Is it natural? Is it, how can we extract more power from that moment, basically? And in fact, this, of course, this event of getting people together to write a book is also a temporary network that was mobilized. Working this way, I would have to say, was surprisingly satisfying and energizing, though of course as soon as it was over, we wished that we had time to redo the whole thing and think it all through again. So it's kind of a process that I just want to say it's great, but I'm not sure, it takes a lot of...
It kills creativity if you're locked up.
It's really, we had to go for lots of walks and tried to vary the takeout that we brought in for, for dinner. So we found that the reason, one of the other reasons why it was so compelling for us to pick this in the end as a topic was that it instigated so many reactions from people. This new aesthetic, this collection of images, just looking at how machines see us and we see them and we sculpt our reality for them. Just that thing in itself really triggered people and caused such a reaction, and so there was a lot of provocations and a lot of positions to map out, which was very rich for us. And we found that the images being used, the particular images being used, raised a whole series of questions around the politics of this. And that wasn't necessarily something that was coming up enough, we felt, in the debate. So we thought that's what we'll do. And that's the cover of the book, and you can, of course, download it from the V2 website. So let's dive in then to some of the kind of meatier topics that came up as part of looking at these images and wondering, like, what are the real implications of this? So, for example, the politics of machine vision and machinescaping our world, the idea of empowerment and surveillance. Starting, of course, with good old Uncle Walter. To experience the aura of a phenomenon means to invest it with the capability of returning the gaze. And now, of course, our machines are, as the images in the New Aesthetic Tumblr show us, capable of returning this gaze in a way. These are some images from an artwork by Brooklyn Brown called A Machine Frame of Mind. This project looks at machine vision as a material to be designed and posits that, and I quote, "The machine-readable world is something we are both constructing and should continue to design for in order to demystify and expose advanced technological processes. Shifting perspectives allows for the discovery of other realities that offer control and enjoyment of how we are seen and understood by computation." And I think that's something kind of key here. The something that at least I kept returning to was this idea of how we are seen and understood. What does it mean to be human? It's the classic, we keep going back to this classic thing, the Turing test, you know, like how are we different than the machines that we create, that are born of us in a way. And from this work, which I think it's interesting, looking at the aesthetics, playing with the whole aesthetic notion of how faces are read, how you map the eyes, all the kind of key points of the face. Of course, there are people that then look at this not necessarily as a material to be designed, but want to turn the gaze around, that want to push things back. They're not interested in this side of the coin. They're more interested in the other side. And so there's also an aspect of looking at where does this come from? This fascination with the face and this fascination with how we navigate the world. It's our passport to, you know, people understanding us and recognizing us, etc. What does it really reflect our true nature? There was a kind of old, strange pseudoscience called phrenology, and it mapped the head in this way, and phrenologists thought they could find your true nature by mapping these bits on your skull and figuring out, you know, you have a particularly large area here or there, which of course is kind of, you know, it's laughable now, and it was of course used also for all kinds of, you know, nefarious purposes. You know, it was used in all kinds of ways, like to prove once and for all that certain kinds of people are not as smart because of course this part of their head is not as developed or whatever. So it's laughable, but the desire to afford so much importance to the appearance of the human head surfaces in other ways, in contemporary ways, such as our ongoing squeamishness regarding face transplants. Perhaps the taboo, this is an image of a woman who on the left is before and on the right is after, of course. These are quite new procedures. These are not procedures that are still very widely done, and perhaps it's not even just because of the difficulty of the surgery, but also just because of the taboo. There's a lack of instant results. I mean, maybe perhaps that's part of the squeamishness we have with it. Of course, as you can see, like the skin of the face is, the newly transplanted face is not completely tightened yet, so they have to do multiple surgeries to ensure that the face is now forming around the new bone structure underneath. But also the simple idea that despite this life-changing positive result for the recipient, who now can have a much more normal-looking face and avoid all kinds of uncomfortable social interaction based on that. But it's as though this person, of course, has now not received a face but a mask, and perhaps that's the discomfort that we have with these things. So we attach a lot of importance to faces and a lot of and the human skull and head, and it all comes, you know, there's a long tradition of it, and we still grapple with it, is kind of the key point I'm making here. And from the face and this aesthetic of the machine-readable world, I thought it would be interesting to now steer towards, again, as I mentioned earlier, people that are turning it around, people that are looking at different ways to use this kind of vision as a method of security even. And I think that there's kind of no better place to start in that kind of conversation when you flip the idea of machine vision around to how do we integrate a kind of machine vision in ourselves than Canadian computer science Steve Mann, widely recognized as the father of wearable computing. Have you guys heard of this guy, heard of Steve Mann? Just checking to see if anybody knows who he is already. I mean, okay.
How it's written?
Steve Mann, M-A-N-N.
Oh, like the...
And he invented this, the iTap glass. Anyway, well, I'll go back. And that was him as a much younger man. This was like the first prototype of his wearable computing proposed device. I mean, it now looks hilariously big, like kind of like one of those original mobile phones that were that, like that big. It's quite amusing. He's been wearing this device since the 80s, he's really been at this like quite some time, trying to really integrate this ability to record everything that he sees and store everything that he sees in the system connected to his skull and keep it for all time. So he's been working on this in the engineering department of the University of Toronto since the 80s and wearing these devices long before anyone thought this was at all even remotely normal, of course. In a recent interview I conducted with him for Volume magazine, a Dutch architecture magazine, I asked him about a recent incident where various perpetrators tried to forcibly remove this device from his head when he was at McDonald's in Paris. You got to ask, well, we'll leave that alone. Why, if you're in Paris, you're at McDonald's? But anyway. Also, as you can see from the picture, that you could imagine trying to take this off his face is quite a job. You need special tools. It's not like taking off a pair of sunglasses. So, quoting from the article in Volume, in 2012, man was assaulted at a McDonald's in Paris with his iTap forcibly removed, despite producing a doctor's letter indicating that the iTap can only be removed with tools. McDonald's has issued a few statements regarding the incident, but denies that he was assaulted by any staff member. In response to this action, which was documented with the iTap, of course, so here it is, here is the evidence, Mann christened the corporate backlash against surveillance. Surveillance is what he calls what he does. So it's the opposite of surveillance. He's doing surveillance, okay? He christened the corporate backlash against surveillance McVeillance, of course, because since it happened at McDonald's. The ethics of surveillance and how it is countered by McVeillance is an issue highlighting from the massive power of corporations to prevent us from documenting our own existence. There they are, ripping up his doctor's note. Mann states that surveillance has both moral positive and moral negative possibilities, of course. So a categorical moral imperative against it, like McVeillance, is necessarily a moral negative. And that in addition, McVeillance is illegal as per human rights laws. So what he's saying is that while you can use surveillance, like your own personal device recording everything around you, for good or bad, you could use it to invade someone's privacy, or you can use it to document your kid playing at home. But any opposition to that in the form of corporate oversight is necessarily a bad thing. And these images are pretty telling. I mean, it's not the guy with the McDonald's logo on his shirt. It's pretty clear he's an employee, so he's perp number 3. Anyway. The integration of machine vision with the body and the public discomfort with this is not the first time, amazingly, that Steve Mann has had his device forcibly removed from his face, raises the question of the legal gray zone that these devices inhabit when watching or watching back. Mann is in fact trying to draft legislation to deal with this issue, because the law is of course a kind of slow beast, and without some prodding it's never going to go anywhere. There might never be any guidelines to counter this kind of corporate backlash against surveillance. So the whole incident that was captured by the ITAP, as you can see here, and whoops, I wanted to show you the first image again, provided some damning evidence against the perps. And the tonnage of evidence collected by man and those who inevitably follow him, he does have some followers who also wear a similar device, and he's constantly streaming and transmitting to the web, raises further issues about the possible nefarious uses of these images. One can easily imagine hired hackers cleaning out your database once they figure out that you've got some documentation of a crime scene, for example. So to solve this, man suggests redundant storage and keeping these databases of images in circles of trust. But even with that in place, I think it remains a kind of sticky issue. It's always possible to hack in. If you really want to eliminate someone's evidence of something, they'll find a way to do it. And as we can see in the image that I showed previously of the ITAP itself, it's eerily looking like Google Glass. Of course, it's kind of spooky, and you have to wonder what kind of behind-the-scenes patent law war is happening now between these guys. Maybe nothing, who knows? But because Steve has, of course, patented all of his technology. If Google's dreams come true, and many of us are soon wearing a glass, and let's face it, they have a much bigger chance of getting this to a wide public than Steve Mann does. What are the right and wrong questions about this kind of technology? The wrong questions, I would suggest, are about like how cool it looks, or how much it costs, or whether saying, okay, glass, to activate it will start to become kind of tiresome. Or, yeah, this lady, web results for awesome. I mean, this is kind of the least interesting thing that we could do with it. But better questions would be, what are our unwitting collaborations with industry? So how will Google make money from your daily life now, once this thing is on your face? An easy example is something like Google Glass tracking your eye movements when you're in this grocery store. The grocery store wants to figure out how come all of a sudden mustard is selling like hotcakes and the potatoes are not selling. Why? So they can look at the eye movements of people in the store and try to figure out, is it because of product placement in the store? Artist Yannick Simon recently produced an open source system for tracking eye movements and exhibited the system as well as the resulting images at Zaketa Gallery in Warsaw. The images were lovely, like this one, indicating where people's eyes lingered in some obvious places and some not so obvious. I mean, it's pretty clear we're looking at the young man's eyes, nipples, mouth, and then the sky. Some obvious and not so obvious. It's easy to see, however, how this kind of information could be interesting for several parties. We can also take part in a kind of deletive reality, where whatever we don't want to see, we don't have to see. And that can become a real reality. This project depicted here, called Artvertiser by Julian Oliver and Damien Stewart, was developed at V2 Lab in 2010. And it's a handheld device that, here, I'll give you a better view of it, a handheld device that really works, substituting advertisements in the city with works of art. So your art here, as the billboard says. While this would be, I think, a positive example of beautifying our urban environment, it's easy to imagine how similar systems embedded in glass or some other platform could allow us to, disregard the homeless, ignore acts of political protest or violence, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever you don't care to have as part of your urban reality, to take it out. So this is where then the morality again becomes a little slippery. These things, as Steve Mann said himself as well, could be used for morally positive or morally negative things. And we should also, of course, question where the gaze is directed and for the benefit of whom. So I already mentioned how Google could make money based on where you're looking in the store. As we noted in our new aesthetic, new anxieties text, other critics had a really strong voice on this in the response to the new aesthetic Tumblr, noting that a surveillance state and a machine-readable world offers a familiar experience to some, particularly the other, women and minorities, who are finding themselves constantly surveilled in public spaces on a daily basis. It's, part of living in culture if you looked different or if you were part of the category of people known as female. One science fiction writer, Madeline Ashby, took the entire machine vision surveillance and machine landscaping culture and wrote a critique, rebooting Laura Mulvey's seminal analysis of film, of the male gaze in film, to point out what was ostensibly exciting about the new aesthetic were fairly normative engendering of control and domination. It seemed like a rather ordinary, age-old aesthetic of everyday women's life. Ashby says, that spirit of performativity you have about your citizenship now, that sense that someone's peering over your shoulder, watching everything you do and say and think and choose, that feeling of being observed, it's not a new facet of life in the 21st century. It's what it feels like for a girl. From here, she made more general reflections on the psychodynamics in screen power and the lack of attention to the ontological and historical differences carried along within the new aesthetic itself. Ashby says again, the fact that it's a conversation between artists and the forces observing them is nothing new. We've been through this before. We used to design cathedrals so grand God had to notice. Now we print the pattern of faded denim jeans on linen pants so cleverly that the internet has to notice. We crochet masks so facial recognition enabled cameras won't notice. Someone has always been watching. Significantly, these perspectives suggest that the new aesthetic not only sentimentalizes surveillance, but much more uncannily extends or projects phallocentric screen relations onto the actuality of things. Of course, current feminist approaches to the cinematic gaze are more nuanced than the original critique that Laura Mulvey made of the male gaze in film. Spectator identifications, whether in cinema or across multiple forms and kinds of screens, are not so clean-cut. We need to take media far more seriously in considerations of political questions. If the notion of the gaze is significant, and if our machines are now watching us, I think it is, then it emerges from how the new aesthetic marks out its strangeness in media and as a theory object. So I think there's definitely a lot of interesting things to unpack there in terms of the familiarity we may have with this kind of experience already, or certain people might have. So, how do we escape the trap? How do we emancipate ourselves from these machines staring us down? Well, machines are our creations. They're limited by the imaginations and capacities of their creators. It's very difficult still to make something smarter or better than we are. It's still not happened. Could do, but humankind has long been fascinated by the possibility of creating the machines that could do the tasks that we can do, but only better. The Mechanical Turk is an example of an early automaton, 1770, created by Wolfgang von Kempelen, which amazed viewers, a machine that was also able to beat people at chess. And it, of course, toured the rich people's homes until people eventually figured out, well, actually, the secret of the success is that there's a chess whiz midget hiding on the little cushion. I don't know if you can see the little cushion there for him to hide. You guys know this piece, right? This is like this is kind of 1770 going back a ways. But back in that time, the idea of kind of automata, like robots that could move and perform simple actions, were really popular in the kind of wealthy classes. So this machine amazed people because it was a Turk who could play chess against a human and win, and everyone thought this was wow, like, how did you do it? What's your secret? Tell me, what's the secret? And of course the secret was like an actual human being hiding inside to control the thing. So the human intelligence was still inside. It was the only way that the machine could ever beat anybody at chess. Many years later, Amazon, better known as the online bookseller, of course, creates a system called Amazon Mechanical Turk. The system matches workers with tasks, or hits, human intelligence tasks, in their parlance. The hits are varied and sometimes strange, but they have one thing in common. They're tasks that humans can do really easily, but computers can't do very easily. So, for example, looking at a series of images and sorting them into, is this an image of a dog or is this an image of a cat? Easy for a human being. I mean, we could do this in milliseconds, but a computer would have to, of course, scan, analyze, could take a long time, actually. So you might get paid 2 cents to go through 100 images and figure out which ones are dogs and which ones are cats. Or you might get a job like this, add one complete sentence to the following story. You know, this is like obviously really pulpy, cheesy, not exactly you know, award-winning fiction, but again, it's really easy for a human being to come up with even a cheesy or simple response to this than for a computer to make something up that's going to make any sense or have any kind of flow. So if you don't like this one, then you automatically accept the next hit and you let someone else do it. And you know, there was actually a very fascinating analysis of this kind of casual work that is happening in forums like for the Mechanical Turk, or also other kinds of casual labor available through online hubs. You know, and the difficulty of making a living off of this kind of work. It's really a kind of like modern day slavery, you could say. I mean, these are jobs that are completed for pennies. You would never be able to earn a living from doing jobs on Mechanical Turk, for example. And another prominent example of the differences between machines and their human overlords is how, of course, computers have finally been able to overtake us in the realm of chess, which is not really about intelligence, but more about brute force computing. So Kasparov versus Deep Blue was the kind of the moment of truth. This was just, you know, kind of a tragic moment for humanity, some people felt. But despite the ability of machines to play chess, it's taken much longer, and some would say it's still a really long way off. The computers can reliably beat humans at the game of Go, where the highest compliment in the game of Go is the very ambiguous good shape. Checkmate, computers have no problem understanding. Good shape, it's a little more subtle. It's a little more different. Although now I had to revise this because I heard of this Go example many years ago and have been thinking about it and keeping it in my mind for some time, but actually had to update my information and find that it's still easy for humans to win against the computer playing Go, but the computers are getting better. So it's as things get more complex algorithmically, they are starting to actually become better at it. It used to be very easy to beat a computer at Go. One of the most eminent faculty of the Bauhaus Art School, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, one of my personal heroes, had construction in enamel in 2 and 3 made at a local enamel factory in 1923. He described his process for creating this painting as calling the factory on the telephone and telling them exactly where the colors and the shapes were to appear, taking the artist's hand totally out of the picture, the famous telephone paintings, as they were called. And I throw this example in because A, I love Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, but also because decades after the original Mechanical Turk automata, and decades before the Amazon Mechanical Turk, Moholy-Nagy essentially Turked out this painting by calling the factory and having them do this. So it's something I thought was a kind of beautiful example. And this image I don't think would look too out of place on anybody's Tumblr these days either. In 1925, Moholy-Nagy said, "Men still kill one another. They have not yet understood how they live, why they live. Politicians fail to observe that the earth is an entity, yet television has been invented. The far seer. Tomorrow we shall be able to look into the heart of our fellow man, be everywhere, and yet be alone." 1925. It's pretty amazing, huh? Incredible that what he said then still sounds so fresh and contemporary now. And that the idea of the far seer is not television or even the internet, but could be represented very accurately in the world of the new aesthetic. Drones, facial detection algorithms, and satellite imagery, enabling the eyes of the state and of multinational corporations to look, if not into our hearts, into our faces and our digital footprints. So we're left contemplating a world wherein, for now, anything built by humans can still mostly be foiled by humans, but reality will be increasingly sculpted to accommodate machine vision and other kinds of automation. So therefore, new methods of subversion will be also invented. And you know, as we saw with the CV Dazzle makeup project, it maybe takes very lo-fi steps, but it's going to be a constant cat and mouse game as these systems evolve. The reality sculpting may look crude because, of course, the systems we design are, for the time being, a bit cruder than we are. tasks that require human intelligence for easy completion, ranging from playing a game of Go to identifying a photo of a cat on Amazon Mechanical Turk, will remain, of course, important for the near future. Etiquette on using your Google Glass in public remains an unsolved mystery, though, of course, your actions will become far less mysterious once analyzed, perhaps by Mechanical Turk workers. So none of this is neutral or without a political context. And as we noted also in, I'm going to quote now the book, the New Aesthetic, New Anxieties book, but actually it's a quote from Marius Watts, who's an artist who posted something online about the algorithmic thought police. It was an effort to unpack the problematic relationship between the artist who writes code and the larger entities that he or she manipulates to produce a visual output. So as we're looking for the way out, thinking that perhaps it's offered by critical engineering or us taking the tools into our own hands, we always, as well, still have to remember the kind of danger inherent there. In his words, algorithms are not neutral vessels. Algorithms provide the means to produce specific outcomes, typically through generative logic or data processing. But in the process, they leave their distinct footprint on the result. Speaking through algorithms, your thought patterns and modes of expression, are shaped by their syntax. These entities, these lists of instructions that calculate a function, of course, become easy to recognize, if not by name, but again, by their distinct footprint on the result. They codify through their outputs a specific, increasingly ubiquitous texture of reality that's being overlaid in buildings, cars, jewelry, print publications, chairs, furniture, you name it. So this is where we're left. This is the dilemma, I would say, of today. How do we empower ourselves to use these tools to fight back, if we indeed want to fight back, if we want to challenge, and of course I think we should challenge, the way that systems are set up to monitor us, to challenge our movement through space, to make our entire lives sit in a database somewhere, of course. What are the ways that we can do it? And of course the tools we're using are not neutral, so we have to dive deep in there and I think really try to understand the nature of the tools that we're using. Which is why it's important when we're looking at these images created and generated by machines or for machines to try to understand a bit more deeper. And I perhaps for this lecture could have done just a very, very, very close reading of one of those images, trying to go with you in there. And that's an exercise possibly worth doing to really understand what's happening there, why that image looks like that, to whose benefit it is, and how it could be hacked. And I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you very much.